Good evening, and thank you for joining me. It's been a long time since I've had this many people in my dining room. I'm going to talk to you today about the Shell Heritage Art Collection, its association with the National Motor Museum Trust, about the forthcoming auction at Lyon and Turnbull, and give you some insights into some of my top poster picks, their historical relevance, and a bit about the artists behind the work. So many of you are already familiar with the Shell Heritage Art Collection. I can see from the guest list that we have a well-educated audience this evening, and I know that many of you have visited the collection in the past. The Shell Heritage Art Collection is a fantastic collection of 20th century British commercial art and includes Shell's historical advertising posters, original paintings, Valentine's cards, cartoons, and press advertisements, plus the ever-popular Shell County guidebooks. The collection is owned by Shell Brands International and has benefited from over 25 years of excellent care under the National Motor Museum Trust. But last year saw a big change to the landscape that we all sit in. We had big plans to celebrate the anniversary of 100 years of the Shell poster. The first Shell poster was produced in 1920, so we were going to celebrate its anniversary through exhibitions, a new publication, and an auction. Whilst galleries and museums were shut, our big plans were cut short. Our exhibitions were cancelled, and a new publication and this auction got postponed. There has also been a lot of changes for the collection and its staff. There was a restructure, and the collection was moved to allow for a reserve collection to stay at the National Motor Museum Trust and the core collection to be housed along with Shell's other archives in their Historical Heritage and Archive in The Hague. Moving the collection was a huge job with over 10,000 items. It took a lot of coordination in quite difficult circumstances and strict codes of health and safety during the second lockdown. And I cannot thank my team enough for the commitment and hard work that they put in during this time. The facilities that they have within the Shell headquarters in The Hague are fantastic, and I work closely with the archivist there, managing most aspects of the collection and the reserve collection that has been kept at the National Motor Museum Trust. This reserve collection will continue to provide the excellent service that has been built up over the years, including access to the collection for people within the UK and a base from which to continue loans of works to museums and galleries around Britain. It also keeps the strong relationship that we have built with Shell going. So whilst there have been a lot of changes, this auction, although delayed, has been able to go ahead and provided the perfect opportunity for Shell to donate funds to the National Motor Museum Trust to support its work and displays within the museum. This also marks the start of a new fundraising campaign by the National Motor Museum Trust to mark its 50th anniversary next year. There are some exciting plans ahead, and we hope we can share these with you soon. There are 49 posters being auctioned in the Lyon and Turnbull sale called Design on the Move on the 29th of April. The lots are all from the popular poster advertising from the 1930s and 1950s and are all duplicates. So I just want to clarify here, they're not reproductions. As Shell's poster advertising became more popular in the 1930s in particular, they began to produce bigger print runs. So these are all original lithographic posters from the original print run. In 1920, Shell began producing posters to display on the side of lorries delivering cans of oil and petrol to its customers all over the country. The posters were 30 by 45 inches and were known as lorry bills. Many of the earlier designs were produced in the in-house Shell studio and celebrated the development of Shell products, such as the reliability of its oil and petrol, petrol that prevented a car from knocking, and oils that would be used in summer and winter. In 1929, Jack Beddington became the advertising manager for Shell, helping to transform the company into a household name and making it a patron of the arts through artist commissions, campaign slogans, and humorous press advertisements. Beddington lacked previous experience of advertising, but with a brother in the art world, good judgment, and an eye for talent, Beddington became one of the most revolutionary figures in British commercial advertising heritage. There were over 1 million cars on the road by 1930, and there was a growing concern against poster hoardings and enamel signs along the roads in the countryside. Heeding these protests, Shell removed all their placards and enamelled signs outside of garages and along country roads, and only had lorry bills. Clough Williams Ellis, architect of Port Merion and president of the Design and Industries Association, wrote to Shell in 1930 praising them of their stand against roadside advertising. The lorry bills became like a public travelling picture gallery, with people eagerly awaiting to see the next design. A journalist recently described it as the pop-up smartphone ad of its day, which I think is actually a very good analogy. Under Beddington's direction, a list of artists not instinctively associated with commercial art were commissioned to convey messages for the lorry bills. Some of these artists went on to become famous names in British contemporary art, including John Armstrong, Ben Nicholson, Edward Ardizone, Duncan Grant, Paul Nash, and Vanessa Bell. Beddington also sourced a host of new young talents, helping to launch the careers of names such as Leonard Rosenberg, Richard Guyot, and Graham Sutherland. Artists were given the freedom to explore different styles and influences in their work. One of our most popular works in the collection is this poster by Paul Nash. Paul Nash was founder of the British Modern Art Movement Unit 1 and was one of the most important landscape artists in the first half of the 20th century. He was an official war artist in both the world wars and produced 3 lorry bills for Shell, all of which echo his change in style from abstraction to surrealism and gave the artist the opportunity to explore different techniques in the public domain. This poster of Kimmeridge Folly in Dorset is a perfect example of his surrealist landscape works and a familiar British landscape. This poster perfectly depicts the mood and the rocky outcrops that define this area of the coast. I visited this area last year with my family when we went searching for fossils. And this picture shows how the folly has been moved back away from the edge of the cliff to stop it falling into the sea. You can also see the great old British weather, which is very similar to how Nash depicted it almost 100 years ago. And this is a picture of me enjoying that British weather in a raincoat. The Visit Britain Landmarks campaign was created from a list of follies written by the poet, writer, and broadcaster John Betjeman, who later became editor of the popular Shell County Guides. Beddington would then allow artists to pick one of the suggested sites and would either accept or reject the artwork, but would never ask for it to be changed in any way. Here are some of the examples. of the Visit Britain's landmarks posters that are in the sale. Along with the Everywhere You Go and See Britain First campaigns, the advertising encouraged the newly mobile public to visit the British countryside in their cars. This leads me to my next top pick, this poster by Leonard Rosenberg. This is by no means one of the most popular posters in the collection. However, it is my favourite. I love the bright colours and the simplicity and naivety of the mark making, which reminds me of pictures that I grew up with on the walls of my home when I was a kid. It's also, I think, a good reminder that if you're ever going to purchase something, go for something you love, as you'll always get enjoyment out of it. This poster by Leonard Rosenberg was created when he was just 23, after he'd left art school and was desperate for work. He said of Jack Beddington that in design circles, he was God at the time, but a bit of a bully. Having been tipped off that Beddington took a shine to girls, Rosenberg approached him with a portfolio which included a couple of nude drawings. Beddington leafed through the work and took out 2 drawings and asked their price. On hearing they were £5, he put them back. Rosenberg thought he'd blown it, but despite Beddington's seemingly unimpressed response, he commissioned the artist to paint Roman Tower at Tutbury. Rosenberg spent what he described as 10 glorious days there and produced a gouache for which he was paid a handsome fee of £100. This launched Rosenberg's career. Graham Sutherland also produced his first commission for Shell. Brimham Rock was Graham Sutherland's 3rd commission for Shell. The strangeness of these giant natural rock formations in North Yorkshire, sculpted by 320 million years of ice, rain, and wind, so impressed Sutherland that he wrote an article about them. This picture marks a change in the development of Sutherland's work from a more naturalistic approach to a freer, more imaginative style. Sutherland is probably best known for his tapestry that he designed for the rebuilt Coventry Cathedral, but is also remembered for his controversial portrait of Winston Churchill, which, if any of you have been watching The Crown, you would have seen an episode that depicts this exact portrait, when it was given to Churchill from the members of the House of Commons and House of Lords on his 80th birthday. Churchill hated the portrait, and it was later discovered that his wife set fire to it. The next set of posters are all from the People Prefer series, portraying a range of professional and social groups that use Shell. The most popular poster in this set has to be Motorists Prefer Shell, with its striking graphics illustrating motors and power, with vorticism and cubist influences. Journalists use shell, also from this series, is another extremely striking image. Towards the end of the 1930s, surrealism was becoming more popular. This poster was designed by Hans Schläger, who used to sign his work Zero. Schläger produced a huge portfolio of work for many companies, including the London Transport, Ministry of Food and other government projects. He was an early designer of corporate identities and designed the circle and bar icon, which became London's bus stop sign, as well as memorable logos for the John Lewis Partnership and Penguin Books. Hans Schläger would always say that the lithographers would improve his design. He said that journalists prefer shell was much better after the lithographers had enhanced the colours and touched up the work. Here you can see this is his original painting and the poster. The next poster in the People Prefer series is this Guardsman Use Shell by Ben Nicholson. Ben Nicholson was commissioned to do this poster in 1938. Shortly after this commission, he married the artist Barbara Hepworth, moved to St Ives and joined the artist group there. Nicholson won many awards for his art and received an Order of Merit in 1968. This period also signals an important development in his work of white reliefs, which can be seen in the background of this poster, alongside some of his later works. The 1930s was a period of experimentation, of new styles, and the posters commissioned by Shell illustrate this. This leads me to the poster king, Edward McKnight Kauffer. Kauffer was an American artist who arrived in the UK in 1914 and is well known for his commercial work for other organisations, including London Transport and Great Western Railway. Kauffer designed more shell posters than any other artist. His geometric designs were strongly influenced by Cubism and Vorticism, and he set new standards for graphic design in poster art of that period. In 1935, Paul Nash stated that Kauffer was responsible above anyone else for the change in attitude towards commercial art in this country. He paved the way for a new generation of designers, and his place is secure as one of the most significant figures in the history of poster design. Edward McKnight Kauffer designed the jointed man that you can see in the center of this picture. It was used in the lubricating oil campaign that ran from 1937 to 1939. The design was based on an artist's mannequin and appears on many artifacts from this period. The mechanical man became one of the UK's most famous brand characters. There are several excellent examples of his work in this sale. But my favourite has to be Actors Prefer Shell, where lettering and layout are an integral part of the Cubist influenced design, with simplified abstract forms to show the actors' many faces. This poster was the last pre-war lorry bill produced, and although it was printed, it was never used owing to the outbreak of the war in September 1939. Kauffer returned to America during the war, but missed the friendships he had made, particularly with Beddington, but he never returned to England. Beddington was a huge support to the artists that he worked with and built close relationships with many of them. This illustration of Beddington as a farmer was by John Armstrong. John Armstrong produced many works for Shell, both before and after the war. Whilst artists were putting Beddington at the heart of their images, Beddington also put an artist back into their work. Originally, Richard Guyot gave the driver in this picture a caricatured face, which Jack Beddington rejected. Instead, Beddington substituted a photo of Richard Guyot himself. This is a close-up of the original painting. Here you can see across the top the outline of where the photograph was cut and placed on top. If you look closely at the lithograph poster, you can also see the line. Richard Guyot was a designer and academic and has been described as a seminal figure in the world of graphic design. The racing motorist poster is set at Brooklands racetrack. And if I can go back, it doesn't really promote safe practice with the driver smoking in a highly flammable environment. In the 1930s, the aviation business grew rapidly. By the end of the 1930s, all the Allied air forces, as well as all important aerodromes throughout the world, and 75% of international airliners were supplied with oil and petrol by Shell. Shell's research and development of fuels, in particular on anti-knock fuels that prevented knocking in engines and engine failure, were instrumental in the development of aviation performance. This was the only poster by Robert Beaulieu ever produced for Shell. Beddington looked at Beaulieu's portfolio, which was mainly, in Beaulieu's words, grubby life studies of girls with hands on hips holding a pole. He said very nice things, but couldn't quite see them on the back of a lorry advertising lubrication. The best he could offer was one hurricane, the prototype, and I could make them look like a squadron. I am sure he not only wished me to give me a job, but also to frighten the Germans, that we might have hundreds of them. In 1939, Jack Beddington left Shell with the outbreak of the Second World War, and the advertising campaign ceased. In the early 1950s, after 11 years of restriction, oil companies were allowed once again to sell petrol under their brand names. There are a few examples in the sale of 1950s posters. And you'll notice that they're slightly smaller than the earlier ones. They were printed by 30 to 40 inches. In 1938, Kenneth Clark, then director of the National Gallery, pronounced Shell to be among the best patrons of art. They are all that a patron should be. They employ young and little-known artists. They provide definite subjects, and they make it possible for an artist's work to be enjoyed by a very large number of people. The collection today is still hugely popular with the general public and has stood the test of time as a highly reputable example of commercial art. If you'd like to find out more, you can find out more about the collection on Shell's website on shell.co.uk under History of the Shell brand. You can also find out more about the collection on the National Motor Museum Trust website, nationalmotormuseum.org.uk, or you can contact me directly on my email address, telephone number, or you can find the collection on Twitter under Shack Curator and Instagram under Shell Heritage Art at Beaulieu. If you'd like to find out more about the auction, please go to Lyon and Turnbull website, which is lyonandturnbull.com. And if you'd like to discover more, in September this year, we shall be releasing a new book about Shell art and advertising, which is being published by Lund Humphreys. And I'd highly recommend you buy a copy. Thank you very much.